Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to see you here on the Zoom screen, or if you're with us on Facebook or on live stream. You know where to find the link for our prayer book, either in the chat or in comments on comments on Facebook, or on the button right below on your live stream screen. It is Saturday morning. I did have a cup of coffee. Awesome. We're going to start our service on page 169 in our Sidurim. We give thanks to you, O God, for this Shabbat day, which unites us as a community of faith and hope. For the holiness of Shabbat, which can lead us to fulfill the best that is in us, we give thanks. For the memories of Shabbat, encircled by generations of our people who observed it and from it drew courage to face hardship and light to banish darkness, we are grateful. We offer thanks for the peace of Shabbat, the day consecrated to family love. O God, our turning to you exalts our humanity. You are the joy of our life, the source of its greatness, its power, and its beauty. Help us, O God, to find inspiration for the coming weeks. Help us to find peace within ourselves and one another. We begin with Hine Mato.
We continue on page 173 as we thank God for our bodies. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. With divine wisdom, you have made our bodies, combining veins, arteries, and vital organs into a finely balanced network. Wondrous maker and sustainer of life, were one of them to fail, how well we are aware. We would lack the strength to sustain life before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of our health and strength. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh kol basar umafli la'asot. We continue on the next page, 174. Elohai neshama shenatata bi. My God, the soul you have given me is pure.
Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehoragi. 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 Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehoragi.
We continue on page 180 with Elu Devarim as we recognize that Torah teaches us how to take responsibility for one another. These are the things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all. Page 194. If you are able, I invite you to rise for Chatzi Kaddish and remain standing through Shema.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. Ve'amad yivrachute v'yamlich malchute. V'chaychonu v'yamechonu v'chayedecha beit Yisrael. B'hagalach u'b'zman kariv. V'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mivarach. Le'olam olam be'amahaya. Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitbar, V'yitrama, V'yidaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitale, V'yitala, Shemei D'chudesha, V'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushmechata v'nachamata, Damira me'alema, V'yimeru, Amen. Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
We continue on 195. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvarei choshech, osei shalom uvarei et hakol. Hami'ir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mal'ah ha'aretz kinyanecha. Tiparach Adonai Eloheinu, al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, Ba'al ma'orei or sha'asita yifa'arucha sela. Or chadash al tzion ta'ir, v'nizkeh hulanu mehera la'oro. Baruch atah Adonai, yotzer ha'me'orot. Page 199. We join together. O God, inspiration and guide for all, you have spoken in 1,000 tongues for us to hear, in every land and every age. Your children have heard you and imagined you in separate ways. And yet, O God, you are one, unifier of humanity. We give thanks for the sages and teachers who bring us understanding of your will. Gratefully, we recall the lawgivers and prophets, the psalmists and sages of Israel. And joyfully, we remember that from the dawn of Israel's life, we would turn to you and find purpose. May the teachings of our ancestors live on in our minds, and their passion for righteousness stir our hearts. Help us to live so that our daily conduct reveals the beauty and wisdom of your truth. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher ba'amo Yisrael be'ahava.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. You may be
be seated as we continue chanting on page 201. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננת לבניך ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Emet.
Emet. We continue on page 203. Sing the song of men and women, joined in understanding and respect. The song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come. The song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet and content, her soldiers home to leave no more. The song of a world redeemed, the song of peace.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Anna, if you can't hear me, there's something wrong with your sound. Everyone else can hear me. You maybe need to turn your microphone up. It's all beautiful until those last notes.
We continue with the Amidah on page 205, and if you are able, I invite you to please rise.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotinu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora,
El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh Hakol, V'zocher Chasei Avot B'imahot, U'mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Leman Shemo V'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magin, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magin Avraham Ezrat Sarah. Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol Ata Rab Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechakel Chayim Bechesed, Mechayeh HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekayem Emunato, Lishene afar, Michamocha bal gevurot, Umino melech, Melech mimit u'mechaye, U'matzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hakol. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Keshem shemakdishim oto b'shmei maram, Kakatuv al yad neviecha, V'charaz el zeh ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai tzimahot, Meloch ha'aretz, Kevodo, Adir Adirenu Adonai Adonenu Mahadir Shimcha B'chol Haaretz, Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimkomo, Echadu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu V'hu Yashmienu, Berachamav le'nei kol chai, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Yitzyon, Ledor vador, Hallelujah, Ledor vador nagiga lecha, Ulenetzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish, V'shichacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush, Le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
You may be seated. We continue at the top of page 211, singing Yismachu as we rejoice in celebrating Shabbat.
Yismachu b'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat b'korei honeg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat b'korei honeg Shabbat. Mekadeshei, V'koreh Hodek Shabbat.
We continue on page 212 as we read together. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. We praise you, Adonai, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha be'ira na'avod. On page 214, we thank God for all that is around us. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons. Modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements. Modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. Modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. Modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. Modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. On page 216, we join together singing our prayer for peace.
Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha. La 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 sim 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 shalom sim 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 shalom sim 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 shalom tova uveracha.
We take a moment now for our own silent prayers.
Ose shalom v'yem rama. Ose shalom. Ose shalom aleinu. Yase shalom aleinu. Ose shalom v'yem rama. Ose shalom. Yase shalom aleinu, Yase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yoshve Tzeven. Yimeru Amen, Yimeru Amen. We ask for peace on earth, and we say Amen. Yimeru Amen, Yimeru Amen. We raise our voice as one, and we say Amen.
We're going to move into Torah mode now. And this week's Torah portion, Chaye Sarah, is one that, as many of our portions in the beginning of Genesis, have many, many components to it. Of course, we start with the death of Sarah and Abraham's pretty intense process of purchasing land, proper burial land for his wife, and making sure that he pays full price for it. Afterwards, we have this moment where Abraham wants to make sure that his son Isaac is going to have a bride. And so he sends Eliezer back to the old country to find the perfect bride for him. And Eliezer finds Rebecca. Rebecca is very generous to him and to his camels. She decides she's going to go off with this perfect stranger to meet a man that she's never met, to marry him. And as the parsha ends, Abraham marries again, has more children, and then he dies too. And Isaac and Ishmael come together to bury him. The part that we're going to focus on today is the moment where Isaac and Rebecca see each other for the first time and discuss what infatuation versus love is really all about, and the necessity for perseverance in any relationship. So hopefully there's going to be a screen share any moment. There we go. So we're going to be looking at this section from chapter 24 in Genesis, Chaye Sarah, and we're going to start by reading our English text and then looking at a few commentaries, as we always do. So, Anna, can you please read the English of the Genesis text for us? Or maybe not.
Yeah. And Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rebekah saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" And the servant said, "That is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her, and thus found comfort after his mother's death.
Thank you. So there's so much in these verses. As I tell all my brides and grooms, normally when we go through the tradition of bedekin, of veiling a bride, many people think that originates from the moment where Jacob, not Isaac, right, is marrying first Leah, then Rachel, though he thinks he's marrying Rachel, right? And that because his bride was wearing a veil, he was tricked, right? But really, the tradition of veiling comes from this particular moment in the text, where Rebecca veils herself when she finds that the man that she's seeing from afar is actually her husband. So we have that piece. We have this idea that Isaac loves Rebecca and finds comfort after his mother's death. This is the first time that love is actually mentioned in a relationship between two human beings in the Torah. So much is going on, and this particular relationship is lifted up as as this beacon of love, not uncomplicated love. As we'll see as we get further along in the story, Rebecca is certainly a powerful, independent character of her own. And Isaac is not always the strongest of men in the story, but they're an amazing team. And because of them, right, our our people continue on. So we're going to focus though on this mutual seeing and what that's all about. If we look at our first verse at 63, we see that Isaac looked up and saw camels approaching. And basically at the same time, Rebecca raises her eyes and sees Isaac. So what is this all about? We'll start with the Rashi. Dale, would you read the Rashi for us?
And she saw now Isaac. She saw his lordly appearance and gazed at him in astonishment.
Great. So she sees him from afar. Maybe she was, maybe she thought that her family that had moved out of town were kind of country bumpkins, but she sees Isaac walking in the fields and realizes that is not so. Rashi says he sees him as, very, very princely, and she's impressed. Okay. Sarna from the JPS commentary focuses in more on the fact that we have the same verb to see 2 times in such quick succession. Sarah, will you read the Sarna for us?
Saw. The Hebrew text employs the identical phraseology for the actions of Isaac and Rebekah, thus conveying an impression of simultaneity.
I don't know. Yeah, simultaneous seeing. Okay. They like big words in the JPS. What can I tell you?
Their eyes met in instant recognition. Each knew instinctively who the other was.
I think this is a very romantic comment, right? That they see each other, they get it, they're pleased. This arranged marriage seems like it was beshert, meant to be. So now we have Aviva Zornberg, who is a brilliant and subtle commentator who sees it not so much as a romantic comedy as a rom-com, but sees the depth of what is to come in that instant of seeing each other, or Rebecca seeing Isaac. Dimitri, will you read the Zornberg for us?
Rebecca saw Isaac. She alighted from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking the fields towards us?" Isaac walks in the shadow of the falling night. His mediation is traditionally understood to be the prayer of the evening, for his thoughts since the Akedah and Sarah's death are locked into questions of transition, change, and reversals. What Rebecca sees in Isaac is the vital anguish at the heart of his prayers, a remoteness from the sunlit world she inhabits. Too abruptly, perhaps, she receives the shock of this world. Nothing mediates, nothing explains him to her. Who is that man? She asks, fascinated, alienated. What dialogue is possible between two who have met in such a way?
So Zornberg, I think, focuses on the innate intelligence that Rebecca has, that she sees him and automatically recognizes somebody who has been through a lot of trauma. And she knows it is now her job to be this person's mate, to be his wife, to help him in what the mission of their people will be, which I think adds so much poignancy to the last phrase of our section, that Isaac finds comfort with Rebecca, right? So this idea that he's only walks at night, that he is dealing with so many different things in his life, and that she, in seeing him, knows what's ahead of her, is pretty powerful. And yet she doesn't walk away, right? She raises her eyes, she sees Isaac, and then she gets off of her camel, right? So she doesn't say, I changed my mind, and go back to her family. She knows what she has to do. And I think as much as we in our modern society focus on love, romantic love is the key to success for a relationship. Anyone who has been in a long-term relationship or watched a long-term relationship disintegrate even knows that initial love is not necessarily a recipe for a long, sustaining, fruitful relationship. There's a lot more involved in that. So what some of our commentaries are going to focus on, while the romance is lovely, that's not really what love is going to be all about. Who's going to read for me? People have hidden their cameras. Jerry, will you read the Hirsch for us, please?
A mere glance into the novels of true life teaches us the vast difference between love before marriage and after. Such love before is blind, and therefore every step into the future leads to new disappointments. Jewish marriage, however, is described here as follows. He married Rebecca, and he loved her. The wedding is not the summit, but only the seed of future love.
So I think it's a little harsh to say that every step into the future leads to new disappointments. But I think what Hirsch is saying is the fantasy that we have when we marry someone or enter into a partnership of how perfect is going to be will lead to disappointment, because nobody's perfect, right? And the longer you know someone and are with someone, then you see their flaws and they see your flaws, right? And that's why Hirsch is saying in a Jewish marriage then, not as much now, that was arranged, was you marry someone and you learn to love them. You find the ways to be a companion to them. And that takes work and commitment and a decision to integrate their flaws into your life, just as you hope that they will integrate your flaws into their life, right? So Fields says it's a strange twist for high romance. One would have thought that love came before marriage. Here, however, it seems to come afterwards. So they are a little offended by that. Some of them are offended that it doesn't say he loved Rebecca and then he married her, because later on with Jacob and Rachel, it will say that Jacob loved Rachel, and then it's a while later that he gets to marry her. But I think that this idea of infatuation versus love is really important for all of us, whatever kind of relationships that we're in. I was reading something this morning about, Zoom fatigue and COVID fatigue, and how much time we're spending either by ourselves or with a very small group of people, and how we can get on each other's nerves, if only because we have nowhere else to go, right? And I think that this in many ways is the true difference between infatuation and love, whether it's romantic or just relational with other people, that it's when we are challenged, when there are trials, that we really see how strong that love is going to be. So Gittleson summarizes that for us. Anna, will you wrap it up for us and read that last commentary?
There are 4 differences between infatuation and love. The first is the test of time, except for the rare instance where infatuation leads to love, it begins more dramatically, develops far more rapidly, and expires while love may still be incubating. The second test is to see whether the emphasis is on the self or the other person, on getting or on giving. The third test is whether the couple is interested exclusively in themselves. Finally, infatuation is purely physical, while love is both physical and spiritual.
Maybe I was drawn to this because I'm doing a wedding this evening of another couple who has had to completely change their plans from big to very, very small in order to get married. One would say, if you've lived life, that those disappointments are going to be small in comparison to other disappointments they may have in their lives, and perhaps making it through this moment of disappointment will strengthen their love and their relationship. But I think that one of the reasons that Rebecca and Isaac are so intriguing as a couple is that both of them suffer, both of them have challenges, both in their previous lives and in the life that they have and in raising their children, and yet they remain dedicated to each other. And the infatuation piece of it is kind of beside the point. And so I think for all of us, whatever our relationships are, working hard to see other people and their needs, having relationships that are mutual, builds love in a way that attraction doesn't doesn't even, that attraction pales in comparison. And it also shows us that we can have deep, loving relationships with people that we're not romantically involved with, because that love is about mutuality. It's about helping each other and lifting each other up in a spiritual kind of way. Something to think about as our pandemic continues to keep us at home and close by the people who are part of the intimate part of our lives. So now Rabbi Jurgen is going to share this Torah text. She's going to chant. I don't know. What are we doing?
We're gonna chant.
Sweet. Okay.
Make it happen. So page 250 are our blessings for reading Torah, and we're going to do them all together. Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach. Baruch Adonai hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol hamim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Vayitze Yitzchak lasuach besadeh livnot arev. Vayisa einav vayar v'negem alim ba'im. Vatisa Rivka et eineha v'tareh et Yitzchak vatipol me'al hagamal. Vatomer el ha'even mi ha'ish halazeh ha'holech besadeh likratenu. Vayomer ha'even hu Adoni v'tikach hatza'if v'titchas. V'yasaper ha'eved liyitzchak et kol ha'devarim asher asa. V'yevi'echa Yitzchak ha'ohela Sarah imo. V'yikach et Rivka v'tihi lo le'isha v'ya'ava. V'yinachem Yitzchak acharei imo. And our closing blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. With the words of Torah on our lips, in our hearts, on our minds, we think of those who face the future not fully whole, those who are in need of that love from us. As we think of them and we say their names out loud, we also think of those whose names are on our screens. We join together singing Misha Berach, page 253.
Of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Yisheberach Yimotenu Lekor bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Amen. We continue now with the concluding section of our worship, page 283. We rise if you are able for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא שם חלקנו לייחד את שמו, וגורר עלינו להמליך מלכותו, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
You may be seated. Our memorial meditation can be found on page 289. In nature's ebb and flow, God's eternal law abides. When tears dim our vision or grief clouds our understanding, we often lose sight of God's eternal plan. Yet we know that growth and decay, life and death, all reveal a divine purpose. God, who is our support in the struggles of life, is also our hope in death. We have set God before us and shall not despair. In God's hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. Under God's protection we abide, and by God's love are we comforted. O life of our life, soul of our soul, cause your light to shine into our hearts and fill our spirits with abiding trust in you. Our thoughts turn now to those in our community who have died at this time in years past. As we mark their yahrzeits, we remember them. Louis Alstafo, Nathan Bame, Milton Barnert, Ann Bendemer, Sherry Geller Berman, Elliot Blaine, Evelyn Breslau, Ralph Carruthers, Harry D. Coyne, Morris Epner, Sarah Bergman Feller, Sophie Feinsilver, Norman Fink, Helene Fattel, Eva Flom, Abe B. Freeman, Sylvia Garza, Ruth Goldsmith, Robert Greenberg, Joe Greens, Florence Groden, Dr. Burton Grossman, Dr. Haskell Gruber, Mary Hinojosa, Michael Allen Hoffman, Ronald Hurwitz, Freda Stern Jackson, Eddie Julius, Sylvia Kaplan, Malcolm Kasanoff, Doris Kirschberg, Eileen Crandall, Faggy Coopersmith, Marvin Coopersmith, Anne Louise Leeds, Annette Lillian, David Mossacker, Estelle Nordhaus, Marie Louise Rotette Powerstein, Max Pepper, Madeline Goldman Pincus, Charlotte Ponamone, Zelda Poulin, Florence Ratner, Arthur Ralphman, Bernice Diskin Reichstein, Sydney Stein, Morris Temkin, Simon Wallach, Madeline Corinne Ware, Lillian Welsh, David Westheimer, Lillian Williger, and Martin Zimmerman. To these names, we add those who've died this past month, whose families are in a mourning period of Shloshim. We remember June Valerie Walker and Dr. J. Michael Freiberg. We also think of one who's died this past week, whose family is in a mourning period of Shiva. Remember Marshall Selman Jacobson, husband of April Jacobson, father of Edward and fiancée Claire Jacobson, Art and Lori Jacobson, and Benjamin and Leanne Jacobson, grandfather of Allison, Abigail, Drew, Tyler, Caden, and Bella. To all of these names, we add those which are in our hearts each and every day, as we join together on page 294 for Kaddish Yatom and rise as a community. Yit Gadal V'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma Divrach Hirutei V'Yamlich Malchutei, V'chayachon V'Yomechon V'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agala U'Vizman Kariv Imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'elam Ulmei Almaya, Yitbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yitpa'ar V'Yitramam V'Yitnaseh, V'Yitadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shemei D'Kudashah B'Richu, Le'ela Min Kol Berchata V'Shirata, Tushbechata V'Nechamata, D'Amiran Be'alma V'Imru, Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. You may be seated.
Our closing song is going to be O Say Shalom. Join with me. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Shabbat Shalom. Wonderful to see you all.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes. Have a good week.
You too.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.